Afghanistan remains in the news, with the Taliban pushing for their agendas and the world consolidating their efforts to find a solution to the current dilemma. The results for ordinary people in Afghanistan have been disastrous, highlighting the extreme danger of overconfident engagement with an untrustworthy partner. The 2 decades following the 2001 overthrow of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan saw the country and its youthful population experience the full force of globalization. It went from being one of the most isolated countries in the world to one of the most connected. But with the Taliban return to power in August 2021, everything has changed to worse, and Afghanistan is once again experiencing the chill of isolation. This is due to the repressive policy settings put in place by the Taliban. With the UN meeting happening in Doha today, we are asking the question as where Afghanistan is heading to. How are regional politics revolving, and what are the current regional dynamics? Welcome back and to Demo Talk, produced and presented by the Afghanistan Center for Peace and Democracy. In this episode, which has been pre-recorded with the ex-Afghanistan Minister of Education, Dr. Mirwais Balkhi, we try to assess the changing dynamics in Afghanistan. As my first question, I asked Dr. Balkhi how he saw the present situation in Afghanistan, and with the Taliban going back on its inclusive government promise now and then, what does he expect to happen in Afghanistan next?
Well, I think the biggest problem in Afghanistan is the distribution of power or the term inclusivity of the government. Inclusiveness has different meaning for different people in Afghanistan, especially political people and elites. For Taliban, inclusiveness means to bring some persons from different ethnic backgrounds who have the Taliban background and from the Taliban party, and then they decorate him as the representative of other ethnic groups. For political parties who are now outside Afghanistan, inclusiveness means their own share in power. And for some other liberal democratic forces in the country, inclusiveness means respecting the institution in Afghanistan, the state apparatus. So, if there is no a deep knowledge of statehood among the intellectuals in Afghanistan and political leadership, it would be very difficult to bring a consensus among the elites, intellectuals, political groups, and Taliban for inclusiveness meaning. So that is why I think inclusivity or using this term tactically or strategically would not solve the problem in the country until or unless we have to have a deep knowledge of statehood for the country so that under that knowledge we can define the inclusivity and then we can draw an inclusive government for Afghanistan.
How is the regional politics revolving since August 2021?
Well, our regional complex is uh, varied in different perspectives, especially when talking about certain regional objectives to follow. Uh, Afghanistan is at the fringe of four surrounding regions, and each region has a different security system. And in each security systems, different countries are competing and contesting for hegemony, for survival, for expansion of power, influence, or extending a sphere of influence. All sorts of politics are going on. around Afghanistan. So when you are asking about the regional politics, I believe that there is no consensus in the regional politics about Afghanistan issue and the Taliban. Some of the countries, since they have uh, a traditional rivalry with the United States of America, they were supporting the Taliban and they believe they won the war. So that is why nowadays they show some sort of flexibility with Taliban and they have kind of de facto relations with the Taliban, though very much conservative and sensitive also how to deal in deep relations. Some of other countries who have traditional rivalry with the Taliban, they are also very much aware of talking about the Taliban and they are just watching from outside the context, means the regional context. So that is why the regional politics is ambiguous and we do not have a clear eye vision about the Taliban, uh, what would be in the future. Some of the countries they think that maybe they can tame and civilize the Taliban and accept it as the reality in Afghanistan, which I argued and completely rejected this notion. Some other countries they believe that it would not be tamed and civilized. So, for the long run, it is not for the security of for the national security and security of the region. That is why this ambiguity resulted in lack of a clear vision about what is going on in the region. Uh, that is what it confused the people of Afghanistan. It confused those who are resisting against the Taliban. It confused also their own capitals, what to do and how to do. That is why we can see a very unconventional relations between Taliban and the countries in the region. Some of these countries they had diplomatic exchanges why they are not recognizing the Taliban, and some other countries they did not go up to that level. So these are the problems and the regional politics that we have in the region. Very ambiguous regional politics we have towards us.
Well, we understand that since the takeover of Afghanistan, the Taliban have had a lot of repressive policies, and the world, they have been engaging the Taliban in one way or another. However, it has been very difficult, in fact, and as we know that today, the envoys they gathered in Doha to talk about the next steps. Do you think that the Taliban government is less about Islamic ideology and more about gaining legitimacy?
Well, the Taliban is a composition of Islamic fanatism, tribalism, and nationalism, especially linguistic nationalism. So that is why it would be very complicated to discuss easily about the Taliban, what they are looking for, whether they are going for establishing an Islamic regime in Afghanistan or they are gaining ideology for their own tribal and linguistic nationalism in the country, that would be complicated. So to analyze and to open some of the ambiguous parts of discussions about the Taliban's existence and the philosophy of the existence of Taliban, I think we can discuss more further about it, and we have to see the analogy of how to uh, have a clear understanding of the Taliban as an organization, as a movement, as an ideology, and certain other factors which are existing inside Afghanistan in the political sociology of the country that we have a group like the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Well, Dr. Bakhi, we understand that the US doesn't have that much leverage over the Taliban after they pulled out their troops from Afghanistan. But on the other hand, we have regional countries like Pakistan, which is very heavily engaged with the Taliban. And then we have India actually sidelined. Well, they think they are sidelined. What do you see for the US, Pakistan, and India in particular in Afghanistan controlled by the Taliban?
These three countries you have mentioned are uh, in different circles of war in Afghanistan, especially the US and Pakistan are belonging to the first circle of conflict in Afghanistan. India will be in the second circle. So both the US and Pakistan, they have a direct influence on Afghanistan in a reciprocal ways, which means the conflict in Afghanistan also has a direct influence over the US and Pakistan, at least in this part of the world. I do not say in all the global politics of the US, but for Pakistan, of course, in all aspects. So these two countries are very important for Afghanistan. I have discussed in my book, American Nation Building, how all things went wrong and how we could at least transform the strategies from a top-down process to a bottom-up process, taking a society, the political sociology of Afghanistan's reality. Anyway, so now also when we talk about the role of the US, Pakistan, and India, how they can do good for Afghanistan, I think the first and very important factor here is that whether we can come to a conclusion over Afghanistan with these three countries, whether Pakistan and India will come to a conclusion over Afghanistan, that would be very much unrealistic if we talk about it. So that is why if the United States of America plays as a mediating role between India and Pakistan in South Asian regional security complex, then that would be easy to give a guarantee to Pakistan and India that a secure Afghanistan is not against the sphere of the influence of India or Pakistan. Because from one angle, what we have seen the conflict in Afghanistan, it is also enrooted in India-Pakistan's competition in South Asia. That is why the Pakistani government, they were all, especially the military government in Pakistan, was very much worried about the Indian influence in Afghanistan, and that is why they wanted to somehow reduce this influence. Also, that the government which was in Afghanistan was very much friendly and cordial relation they had with New Delhi. So that was the major concerns for Pakistan. So if I put it in this way, that if the United States of America play a mediator role between India and Pakistan over Afghanistan policies, I think that would be workable and it is applicable.
Dr. Balkhi, one other point which is quite important, especially post the Republic fall in Afghanistan, is actually the displacement of thousands of people from the country. And on the other hand, the cream of the society who left Afghanistan for different reasons, and now they are living in different countries. So, do you think that the displaced people of Afghanistan will come back to Afghanistan once, if the situation is restored? And on what grounds?
First of all, let me say that this displacement has caused a great loss for Afghanistan because most of these people have been the bureaucrats, technocrats, civil society activists, intellectuals, elites, media people, human rights activists, and all talented young generation who left Afghanistan to different destinations. Now they are in the status of resettlement in different other countries. So resettlement needs uh, all efforts, energy, time, focus, especially post-trauma uh, displacement cure. So they have lost whatever they had in Afghanistan. Majority of them, they do not have now any possibility or any facilitation so that they return Afghanistan uh, and having a secure job, a secure living in the country. So I don't think all of them they return to Afghanistan, but some of these displaced people, of course, before also they had returned to Afghanistan after the 2001, and they served in Afghanistan. They were in Afghanistan, but take for example like this that out of 100 people who are displaced out of Afghanistan, maybe 20 of them they return. If we take it very much idealistic, otherwise I think this great loss will be continued, and Afghanistan lost all these talents, unfortunately.
Well, we do understand that a lot of countries are engaging the Taliban on different grounds. A lot of these countries have security issues, and some of them have economic actually problems or means to deal with the Taliban. But on the other hand, people accuse some Islamic countries of being silent on the adversaries caused by the Taliban. What are these Islamic countries really doing to pacify the situation?
About the role of Islamic countries to pacify situation in Afghanistan, I would say if you take it idealistic, they are somehow collectively trying to pacify the situation in Afghanistan through organization of Islamic conference and different other platforms. But realistic, if you analyze the situation, then it would be very difficult to pretend that the Islamic countries and the Islamic world they have a clear and collective vision over Afghanistan situation. You have different Islamic countries with different national interests, different perceptions, different objectives, and individually they are approaching to Afghanistan. Suppose Pakistan is an Islamic country, you know what is the perception of Pakistan over Afghanistan. At the same time, you may have, for example, Saudi Arabia. They have kind of conservative relations and approach nowadays towards Afghanistan. And then you have a country like Turkey, Indonesia, Malaysia. Tajikistan is also an Islamic country who is opposing the presence of Taliban. So that is why Islamic countries in the idealist approach through different mechanisms, they are somehow announcing their formal policies towards pacifying the situation in Afghanistan. But individually, uh, I think they have their own approach based on their own national interests and regional interests, and it would be very difficult to anticipate that a group of countries called Islamic world will have a collective approach to pacify really the situation in the country.
Well, speaking of the relations in particular between the Taliban and Pakistan, how do you see the current dynamics of the relations between Pakistan and the Taliban? And when speaking of this, of course, the issue of TTP and ISIS also comes in. Where is this TTP and ISIS in this Rubicon?
I believe that the Taliban in Afghanistan and the TTP on the one hand, and the Haqqani network, the ISK on the other, they have a symbiotic relations. They belong to their own and each other's survival. That is why it would be very much unrealistic if you would say that the TTP they do not have any kind of relation with Taliban, or the ISK they do not have relations with the factions within Taliban, since they collectively fought for 20 years with the same sanctuaries, with the same sympathizers, with the same soldiers, with the same objectives. How would be possible to think overnight they are divided and they have their own objectives or ways? So it needs more elaboration and more details to talk about what kind of relations they have, what kind of relations they will have, and what are the objectives after Afghanistan. It would be very, again, optimistic to think that the Taliban, they gained power in Afghanistan. That was their uh, uh, long objective and the long goal. So they reached that and they do not have any other mission. That is why when you talk about Afghanistan, when you talk about the Taliban, when you talk about the situation in the country, I think taking the next step of the conflict in the country, we have to analyze from that framework and we have to then prescribe how we can go further to pacify the situation or to be involved so that things get better in the country and the people of Afghanistan also live in peace like any other peaceful nations in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Balkhi, for your time and insights and analysis. Please stay tuned as we will talk to more experts and people from different spectrums of the society on Afghanistan. Thank you so much for watching and see you soon.